Here's two favorites. Maynard. we were playing somewhere, I forget where we were, and at the time Maynard had the band set up in a V, so the rhythm section's in the middle, the saxes are on the left, the trumpets were right behind the rhythm section, and the bones were on the other side, so it was this V set up, which looks good, but it's always tricky to hear. You're always so far from everybody, but you get used to it. Anyway, I stood right on the end of the V, so if you're looking at the band from the stage, I was on the left. If you're looking at it from the audience, I would be on the right. And when someone was soloing, sometimes Maynard would walk over and just kind of stand by me because I was at the end, and we would talk while things were happening on stage. Some of the best conversations happened at that time. So someone's taking a tenor solo, tenor sax, and Maynard walks over and he says, well, this is while the band's going on, and he says, what's this thing about the tenor? Everybody's kind of sounding like they don't have this certain sound. What's going on? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, the approach is the same, I'm hearing, And I said, well, I think it's Michael Brecker. He's such an influence. A lot of guys are listening to Michael. This is back in the 80s. And Maynard says, well, he said, why don't they leave that poor kid alone? And, meanwhile, the soloist up there, he's up there playing, he sounds great. And Maynard said, when we were playing, we wanted to sound like ourselves, and the idea was to get your sound and your identity out as soon as you played, not to copy somebody. What's going on? Because education, I don't know, it's ruining jazz. Oh man, woo! That was something. So anyway, later on, maybe a couple weeks later, maybe it happened before, but it's along the same lines. Someone wrote a chart, an original, and in Maynard's part, instead of writing the chord, they wrote the mode. And when it came to Maynard's solo, he's looking at the part, and he walks over to me, because by then, after about 2 years, he was more of like a big brother type of relationship. So Maynard comes over with his part, and he says, hey, on my solo part here, what's the, what is this? And it said G. Locrian. And if you're not a musician, don't worry about it. But he says I said, well, it's G. Locrian, boss. I said, that's just like, it's like your A flat major scale. Just play, start it off on G, and you'll get the sound of it. And he goes, I don't know, man. I don't like where this whole thing is going. He's talking about how it's becoming more intellectualized, and he says, Locrian, So it comes up. He doesn't know what Locrian means, but he hears sounds. These guys who play by ear or they listen so much, what you called a chord was irrelevant. They heard it as a sound, and they could adapt to it and play off it and create on it. And they have such a download of great vocabulary that they can, they just know what to do. But when you start giving it names, you think there are a different set of rules, and there really isn't. It's just another way to call it. So the Maynard comes up to his solo, he hears the sound, and he plays beautifully on it. And afterwards, the fellow who wrote the piece, I don't know why he did this, but he tried to vibe Maynard. He tried to vibe Maynard afterwards, and he says, I think the fellow who wrote this piece knew that Maynard didn't know the modal vocabulary, even though he could certainly play to it because he heard the sound. And what happened was, I don't know why this guy did that, but anyway, he said, Maynard, when you played on that, did you use the mode, the straight Locrian mode, or did you use the super Locrian with the natural 2 as opposed to the flat 2? And it was real quiet, and the only thing Maynard could do would be be embarrassed, And Maynard said, the Locrian, the only thing I know is Locrian. Sounds like a cheese. Which was so great, because the band just stayed at my mother's house, and she had this great Lucatella cheese, and I remember she was shredding it. She goes, this is Locatella, it's the best. So he goes, Locrian, it sounds like a cheese. Oh man! So these guys who heard the music a certain way, it was so in them. The sounds. Maybe they could codify it, maybe they could explain it, maybe they could intellectualize it. But you can fall in love with the intellectualizing part and not make any music out of things. And these people that were so filled with music, they didn't care what you called it. And I remember seeing Thad Jones give a clinic down in Atlantic City when I was in college, and somebody tried to do the same thing. I don't know why you would try and vibe a legend. I mean, what? You might as well stand on the railroad tracks and just like wait for the train to come. What do you expect to accomplish? But we went down to Atlantic City. Thad Jones was giving a clinic, and someone asked Thad, "How do you get the sound of your chords that way? Do you get the upper extensions, the 13th and 11th and 9, and tuck them underneath right next to the thirds and sevenths? Is that what you do?" Which is kind of exactly what you do. So what this kid was doing, he was trying to, in front of Thad and the whole room, by asking the question that way, he was trying to show off that he knew the answer already. It was really, and you don't vibe Thad Jones. I mean, you could do a whole thing on Thad. He was great. Oh my God. So this kid asked this question to Thad Jones: "How do you get that sound? What do you have to do to get that sound? Do you tuck all those upper extensions next to your thirds and sevenths?" And then it's quiet. And they're looking up at Thad. And Thad Jones, by the way, this is Thad. Right there. That's Thad Jones. Anyway, he asks Thad, how do you get the sound? Do you tuck the extensions next to the thirds and sevenths?" And Thad just looks at the kid and says, "The way you get this sound is you got to eat a lot of greasy meat." I love those guys. They're greasy meat. Education's root in jazz.